Namaskaram. Welcome to this second episode on the Viśnū sahasra-nāmā. We have been looking at the Dhyana Shloka of Shantakaram Bhujagashayanam Padmanabham Suresham. Today we will look at Vishwadharam Gaganasadrusham Meghavarnam Shubhangam, the second line of this four-line stanza. Before we go to that, let me wish you a fullness of unending nature on this anantana hunnimé, or the Ananta Paurnami, which always comes after the Chaturdashi, on which we celebrate the penance of Ananta Padmanabha Swami's vratā. So these two come right next to each other, and this Paurnami is also supposed to be very special for the mahéśvara vratā, that is for our Agnya and the Sahasrara chakra, and those are two of the four chakras that we will be focusing on today for Uma and Mahéśvara, which is a very integral part of the Viśnū sahasra-nāmā also, because Parvati and Shiva play a very, very critical role in the Viśnū sahasra-nāmā of the Mahabharata. In fact, I recited to you one of the more popular shlokas, Shri Rama Rameti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasra-nāmā Tattulyam Ramanāma Varanine. And as soon as I finished reciting that and finishing the recording and the uploading, and I went out of my recording studio, I was pleasantly surprised by somebody very close to me who arrived from Ram Janmabhoomi, Ayodhya, and presented me with this wonderful shawl, and also the prasad from the Ram Janmabhoomi, including this particular picture, which we will visit one of the future days. Now, let's continue with where we left off yesterday. Just to revise, Shantakaram, or our own embodiment of being peaceful, because that is the first step towards a spiritual path, and that peace is a basic requirement even for our day-to-day functioning, leave alone the higher or inner realms of spirituality. So we have crossed through the tamasic nature because of the relaxation, restfulness that we have got in our deep sleep. We have woken up, an awakening in a multifaceted sense, and then we went on to say at the Swadhisthana chakra, Bhujagashayanam, and talking about our mysticism, our ability to perceive things with a much wider reach, and that connection will come back today as well when we go to the Agnya chakra, and between the mother and the son, Parvati and Muruga, the transaction that took place of the Jnana veil, or the symbol of knowledge and wisdom, the Jnana Shakti, that is the Vetri veil, the lance weapon. Which typically is a rod with ending in a shape like this. For those of you who are not familiar, the weapon that Kartikeya carries. Now, after that, Bhujagashayanam, we also said that the Shayanam represents the relaxation, which is a carryover from our tamasic nature, but with an awareness. So that's the difference between the tamasic sleep and the Rajasic sleep, where you have an awareness built into you even as you are relaxed. So then we saw Bhujagashayanam. Next we saw coming to the Nabhi, we saw Padmanabham, and that taught us about going away from the misuse of one of our greatest resources, memory, which unfortunately many people suffer. If you look at almost all the psychological diseases, either they are because of memory being misused, or because of imagination being misused, and both of these are great assets if well used, appropriately used. And to be able to appropriately use them, we have to take care of the mind properly, represented by our little finger, and we have to ensure that it is used only when necessary and in the way that is most optimal for the particular purpose that we are using it for. Now, we've been talking about all this establishment of various aspects in our hand as a remote control, This is not something out of the blue that comes to me, though I might be putting it in a very original packaging. The Vedic scriptures, especially the ritualistic parts of the Samhitas, Brahmanas, etc., very frequently talk about what is known as the Karanyasa. Kara means hand, and Nyasa means the establishment or invocation of the various deities within the hand. I remember I very carefully choose the word deity or a deva to refer to the so-called gods, because as I've very frequently mentioned to you, there's no concept of gods. Just to blend with the other religions, we have brought in these concepts of prayer, belief, God, religion. None of these four existed in our original version of the Sanātana Dharmā, which of course is an evolving thing, and therefore you can still call with all of those additions or imports from Western religions as now a part of Sanātana Dharmā, but ours is a far more fundamentally spiritual, individual way of approaching God, which eventually translates into how we integrate with the society and the world, and that's why the much greater ability for our all-inclusive contributions, as opposed to being exclusive and saying ours is the only way, and if you don't follow ours then you're doomed, and therefore you better convert to my faith. So this kind of an approach is never there. It's for each individual to choose their own paths, whichever suits them, and that's what Jai Shri Ram, the Ayodhya issues also involved, eventually leading to a win for the Rama himself as a baby, who was one of the litigants as far as the court case is concerned. That apart, we looked at Karanyasaha, which is the establishment or invocation of the various aspects of divinity within our hands, because that's where it is, because being omnipresent, it is there as well. It's there in faraway places, it's there within us. In faraway places, it's not so easily accessible to us. Right here, it's accessible to us, and that's the reason why this is far more significant to us than so-called Vaikuntha, or so-called Kailasha, or so-called heaven, or so-called Jannat. No, right here in our hands. That is Karanyasaha. Similarly, we have a concept called Anganyasaha, which is for each part of the body we invoke the various divinities. When we say invoke, in reality, it's actually a remembrance of what is already there, just that we have forgotten. We think of this just as a feet, this as just a knee, this as just a thigh, this as just a hip, and so on and so forth, the abdomen and so on, all the way up to the scalp. But in reality, all of these are various aspects of divinity, and this becomes more and more clear as we start mapping the physical to the subtle, and which is where probably a new novel way of looking at things. As I have already mentioned, do not believe in inventions. Discoveries, probably an appropriate word. We are uncovering, uncovering the truth, and this truth I want to take beyond merely Karanyasaha and Anganyasaha. Anganyasa is also very familiar even to Tamilians, because for example, the Kandashashti Kavasam, துதிப்போர்க்கு வல்வினை போம் துன்பம் போம் நெஞ்சில் பதிப்போர்க்கு செல்வம் பலித்து கதிதோங்கும் நிஷ்டையும் கைகூடும் நிமலரர் கந்த ஷஷ்டி கவசந்தனை அமரரிடம் தீர் அமரம் புரிந்த குமரனி நெஞ்சே குறி ஷஷ்டியை நோக்க சரவண பவனா சிஷ்டருக்கு உதவும் செங்கதிர் வேலோன் பாதம் பொன்மணி சதங்கை கீதம் பாட கின்கினியாடு மைய நடனம் செய்மயில் வாரனார், and so on and so forth. Varga Varga Murga Varga. In that, towards the middle somewhere, we start talking, in fact a very large portion of that Kanda Shashti Kavasam, we start talking about the various aspects of Muruga in the various parts of our body. Now that's the physical body. So hand, then the physical body, Karanyasaha, Anganyasaha. Now what I am taking you to is even further deeper inside us, to our subtle body, not to the physical hand, to the physical rest of the body, but to to what we are in reality, that is going farther away from the farther interior from the body and the mind and the intellect to our very conjoined aspect of Parabrahman or Paramatman, which we are, and the life energy, the vital energy or prana or mahaprana that we are involved with. Rama Lakshmana Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki. I am Atma Brahmana Kaya Mano Buddhi Jai Bolo Mahapran ki. I have been bringing up this bhajan as well, popularizing it, something that occurred to me through deeper meditation, in which the Mahavakya I am Atma Brahma comes as well. So you can see another video in the Katham series itself where I talk about this particular equivalent of Rama Lakshmana Janaki Jai Bolo Hanuman ki in a spiritual sense of I am Atma, na Kaya na Brahma na Kaya, Mano Buddhi Jai Bolo Maha Pran ki, and that's where this comes. So once we start identifying with that, we move further deeper than just a karanyasaha or anganyasaha into a chakranyasaha. So this is a new nomenclature that I thought of just as I sat here for this particular video shoot. So this karanyasaha that we are talking about already showcased to us from the various aspects of the individuality at the physical level, and so does the anganyasaha also. But this chakranyasaha that we are doing, the identification rather than, see there we are talking of establishment, because in the physicality it is bounded and we are trying to establish something which is non-physical or rather metaphysical, beyond the physical, without the boundaries. So it looks like kind of a tight fit. But here at the chakras, they are already metaphysical, being in the subtle body, and therefore we do not need any tight fitting as such. It's a perfect fitting that we will have. And that's where we saw our own peaceful nature in the Muladhara chakra, our own mystical nature and restful nature in the Swadhisthana chakra, and then we saw our own ability to utilize our great gift of memory of all kinds, not just that in the brain, but even our genetic memory and so forth, some of which I'll refer to in the third of today's 4 names as well. So many people say there's only 1,000 names in the Viśnū sahasra-nāmā. That's after the meditation shloka that we are considering right now. But I tend to take the meditation shloka as one of the most significant in that and add its names to the rest, and therefore I talk of 1,008 names, where the 16 words that make up this particular meditation shloka are very beautifully constructed. This number 16 or the hexadecimal system is very, very significant as well. Even our own leadership of all categories, Ganesha, has a very beautiful shloka called Mushika Vahana Modaka Hasta Chamara Karna Vilambita Sutra Vamana Rupa Mahéśvara Putra Vigna Vinayaka Pada Namaste. So 16. So you see, the 16 is very special because when you're considering these 7 chakras in the body and the 2 above, the total of 9 chakras. But as you breathe in, you go all the way up to the 9, and then when you're doing a japa, what happens is after the 9th, then again 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, again 1 at the Muladhara. So you see 16 is one full cycle that you go through of inhalation and an exhalation, and then again for the next inhalation you start with number 1. So 9 plus the 7 becomes 16, and therefore there are many different stanzas and shlokas of 16 words, and what we are considering right now, Shantakaram Bhujaka Shayanam, is something very similar to that. Of course, you can break each one of those bigger words into smaller and make it even more than 16, or combine them and make it into less than 16. All of these are possible, and the way it is written might be different, etc. But for all practical purposes, we can think of it as 4 lines of 4 words each, and some of which are compound words, and then you have these 16, which is 9 to go up and 7 to come down, and that's of course because 2 are boundary points, so the 9 in the inhalation is actually only 7, because there's a starting point and ending point. If you remove that, and namely the Muladhara chakra and the Guru Gayatri chakra, there is only 7 in between. So the motion is for 7, both in the inhalation as well as exhalation. One is the takeoff airport, if you want to call it, and the other is the landing airport, the departure and the arrival. If you'd like to look at it, even if it's a railway station, a departure railway station and a arrival railway station, or a departure bus stop and a arrival bus stop, and in between there are so many bus stops, it's not a non-stop bus. There can be even more. Just that our super express train doesn't stop at some of these smaller stations in between, so we stop only at these major stations. And we could probably, as we deepen our spiritual practice, get double promotions and triple promotions. We can jump even these major stations and become a Rajdhani Express, or an aircraft actually which directly goes from the departure airport to the arrival airport without having to hop on. And of course, except for a few low-cost airlines which might need to reconnect through multiple airports in order to cut costs. Well, that's a management issue, right? Now we are talking about